Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host, as always. Joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing pretty well, man. Excited to talk about this schedule and break it all down and see where Chargers fans are at, because I'm anticipating maybe they're a bit overrated in the eyes of some. I like them plenty fine. I believe in them this year. But yeah, it's been an interesting ascension from specifically the Joe Alt selection, because it was like rock bottom. And then now all of a sudden we're winning the Super Bowl. So I'm curious where Chargers fans lie. Let me know what you guys think in the chat.
Yeah, so we are going to do our record prediction. I have a feeling that we're going to come in a little lower than some people. It's really funny because, like, the people that were most upset at the Keenan Allen trade and consecutive Joe Alt picks, they're the ones, like, trying to say that the Chargers are going to win 12 games this year. And I'm just like, that does not compute. Like, how did you come to that conclusion after hating the biggest two moves of the offseason? So it's going to be fun. I think that this schedule and the coaching staff is going to do a lot of favors for the team this year. I was actually looking at like how the Houston Texans went last year, and very different situations in terms of like the roster, but the way that their season went, I could see a similar season unfolding for the Chargers, where you're kind of like starting a bit slow. Things have to come together and click, new regime, kind of roster overhaul, culture changes. And then the schedule for the Houston Texans was like pretty easy down the stretch. And they were able to obviously turn that into a playoff appearance. So I was kind of thinking about that. But before we get here, have you watched the X-Men finale yet?
Oh, heck yeah, I've watched the
Okay,
finale.
okay.
I watched it on my prep period during school, and I'm sitting there like
nice. So we're not going to do spoilers. Obviously, Tyler and I are big pop culture nerds, but I had to talk to you about this, and we could have done this off camera, but you know, most of our chat also watches the show. I think X-Men 97, the first season, might be one of the best seasons of television history. Like, I didn't know what to expect of the season. I definitely did not expect what happened. And for me, it was just like one of my most favorite television watching experiences that I've had in my entire life, because of the depth that it went to, like, emotionally. And like the action scenes were fantastic. The writing was fantastic. Then obviously the song, you know, to top it off. So wanted to chat briefly about that, because I honestly think it's like one of my favorite shows of all time.
it is truly outstanding. And like you, I didn't know what to expect. You know, I was one of the few people who actually watched like the Iron Man cartoon and Spider-Man and X-Men. Growing up, like Iron Man was not super popular, but I watched that one because my dad really liked Iron Man, and I watched like the old like 60s or 70s cartoon for Iron Man.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what to expect. And Disney has not really had a great run so far of comic book properties outside of like Loki, which finished super strong, and that was awesome too. But overall, I haven't loved it. So I'm jumping into this cartoon show. How's it going to be? You know, and it's one of the best comic book things they've ever done, that anyone's ever done. I think it's got to be, other than maybe like Logan, and you know, you can put it's up there in terms of like X-Men properties for sure. I could not believe, like, animation as a medium is incredible, and we see that with the Spider-Verse movies, right? But then the writing of the show and the bars, every single character just has bars and callbacks, and it's within this comic book genre. I love what they're able to do with this medium of animation, and it's definitely not a kid's show. And I know that it's like super graphic or, as you know, swear words all the time or whatever, but it's just a mature show with mature themes, and I could not believe how much I liked it. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's main characters, obviously, right? But like the X-Men universe in the movies was so Wolverine centric, and it still is to this day. Like, we're getting another Wolverine movie basically this summer. So you learn a lot about like these characters and like the true natures of their powers and like their journeys in this show that were severely underwritten and underperformed in the movies, which I think it's always something that I really enjoy. So
Yeah.
yes, we will talk about football, but I know a lot of our audience also watches and nerds out about stuff like this too. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to bring it up for a second.
Yeah, still can't get Channing Tatum to be Gambit. They've been trying that for like 20 years. Like a Gambit movie in general. Would that be a lot cooler now having watched this show? Like, yeah. Rogue, did you have any idea watching the X-Men movies that Rogue could do that and
No.
be that powerful? Had no
No.
shot. I mean, I guess I won't spoil it, but like there's moments where it's like, oh, Rogue's a whole different level.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's fantastic. Please watch it if you haven't. It's not just a kid's cartoon. It's awesome.
Yeah, like my oldest brother has kids, and I don't know if I would want those kids to watch the show.
If they watched it, like awesome. I don't know that they would. It'd be an interesting entryway to a lot of discussions, and I think kids would watch that and be like, and just be like, "Ooh, fun, yay!" and intense and whatever. But I don't know if they would get through all the themes. But it's certainly a way to introduce certain themes for sure.
For sure, that's fair. All right, let's get to some football talk. So we are here today to dive into the Chargers schedule from yesterday. Like yesterday, we did a lot of the reaction to the actual video, and it was just like kind of surface level thoughts. So you guys know us. We love to go in depth. We love to dissect every little possible storyline. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the Chargers schedule in depth, at length, and all the different possibilities that can come from this season. So we're going to talk about the most likely wins, most likely losses, biggest toss-ups, toughest stretches, most schedule-friendly stretches as well. And then we'll end the episode by giving our official record prediction as of May 16th, which is subject to change based off of health, both for the Chargers and for the opponents. So disclaimers obviously on May 16th.
Yes, absolutely.
Today's show, as always, is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. You can get a deposit match up to $100 by using the link in our description, which is prizepicks.com/guilty to take advantage of the NBA playoffs. The WNBA started yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. You can do that on there. Obviously, you can do Major League Baseball. The NHL hockey playoffs are wrapping up as well. So it's a great way for you guys to get some skin in the game outside of just obviously football. So again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty for a deposit match up to $100.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, let's dive in here. Again, we do have a slide deck as always. We know you guys love the slide decks here. And we've kept the same theme. You know, that was another thing that I think people mentioned in the comments. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. All right, most difficult 4-game stretch. The same for both of us. This is, I don't think, a surprise. But Tyler, what's kind of your thought process about this 4 games? Like, do you think that the league like screwed the Chargers with this stretch? Like, how difficult is it? Where are you at in terms of like the scale of difficulty for the Chargers this year with this 4-game stretch?
Yeah, I definitely don't think the Chargers got screwed here by any means. And it's certainly nice to be broken up by the Falcons game. And it is really nice that they get the 2 very difficult games against the Bengals and the Ravens at home. And I believe before that, like it's not like they travel a ton leading up to that either. So it's nice that they have that 2-game stretch there. But it's not an easy one. These are 3 of the 4 best teams in the AFC probably this year, depending on how you feel about the Bengals, I guess. But the Ravens and Chiefs certainly. So it was tough to find a stretch where like all 4 games were difficult. Like clearly the Falcons is the awkward third dragon, sitting here with its tongue sticking out as not exactly being a difficult game. But even then, it's a road game, and you never know. Like the Falcons are talented. There's just a lot of new pieces there, but it will be towards the end of the season. So yeah, just 3 difficult AFC opponents, and will not be easy.
No, I think obviously the Falcons game, I feel pretty good about their chances of winning. But I would say that this 3-game stretch of Bengals, Ravens, Chiefs is potentially the most difficult 3-game stretch that I can remember, at least like in the last few seasons. Because I think that, the Ravens and the Chiefs were obviously in the AFC Championship game. We're talking about one of the teams that went, to back-to-back Super Bowls and won Super Bowls. They've won 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. Like the Chiefs are obviously this generation's dynasty, unfortunately for us as Chargers fans. And then also I think the Ravens are just an absolute unit. And we know, the kind of skill set that Lamar Jackson can bring to the table and be able to just wreck games with his legs and his arms. That is the Harbaugh Bowl, and I think there's going to be a ton of energy and enthusiasm and excitement about that game. And we know that Jim is going to be worked up to win that game. I think John is going to be a little bit more like even keel in that matchup. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of my impression there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bengals, like, I'm a little lower on the Bengals than some. Like, there are some media that they could be like AFC Championship caliber team again this year. I'm not there, but I do expect them to be a playoff team. And this is, the Justin Herbert versus Joe Burrow game. So I do expect like 3 of these games to be extremely difficult. Thankfully, you do have kind of that Falcons game in here to break it up a bit.
Yeah. So Kevin points out Joe Burrow's wrist. There's been some back and forth speculation from like media members and doctors and whatever about how much he's going to be able to use that wrist in the future. So we'll get into that, I guess. We'll see how that happens before the Chargers even get to this game. But the good news with this stretch, I guess, is that there is some turnover. Like Callahan is not with the Bengals, although it's not like Zach Taylor can't do the offensive stuff. Like Donald's no longer with the Ravens. The Falcons have a different head coach, which I guess could be a good thing. So there's a lot of moving parts there. So it is a difficult stretch, but there are some questions that need to be answered with this team, or the 4 teams there. Or I lied. The 3 teams there. The Chiefs, I know how good they are.
Yeah. And I think even the Falcons it's difficult, right? Because they have Kirk Cousins, who I know people are kind of lower on, but like he's a consensus top 12 quarterback, and the weapons that the Falcons have, this is a tougher matchup than I think people will give it credit for. So I it's not, the most difficult matchup. It is in Atlanta. It is at 10 a.m. Like that could be kind of a more difficult game than Chargers fans are kind of making it out to be. We've seen this, the West Coast to East Coast trips at 10 a.m. always are kind of slow starting games. Maybe at that point, Kirk Cousins is really in the zone at that point in the season. So yeah, it's certainly not a cakewalk, as Edsky points out in the chat. I think that is kind of an underrated, difficult game for the Chargers.
Yeah, that's not an easy stretch there for sure, especially after the Monday Night Football game, having to travel to Atlanta. Everyone talks about overlooking a team. I don't think Harbaugh will ever let the Chargers overlook another team, but you have the at Chiefs, which could decide whether you really get into the AFC playoffs or not. So there's definitely a lot of, overlooking there. And we'll see what this Chargers defensive back room or even the defense overall is by the time we get to that point, because I don't know who's stopping like Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier and Rondale Moore, and Darnell Mooney. It's not like it's the greatest 3-weapon team ever, but there's a lot there. And I don't know if the Chargers have enough talented bodies to take care of all those players.
Yeah. Kevin Kernick says the Falcons have no corners. We will not have Clark Phillips erasure on this show. He is a starting caliber corner.
Did he go to Utah?
Yeah, I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Just kidding. I think he's going to play the slot for them this year, which I kind of hate, but is what it is. All right, we'll get to the next slide here, which is a different set of games for us. We did pick different ones here. I'll just make the switch then. So this is the most favorable 4-game stretch. I guess I'll start here. I have the last 4 games of the season for me. Looking at the Buccaneers, Broncos at home, and then at Patriots and at Raiders. I think this sets up extremely nice for the Chargers to end the season on a high note. I do expect the Buccaneers to come back down a little bit to earth this season. Dave Canales, their offensive coordinator, leaves, and Liam Cohen comes over from the University of Kentucky. I don't really believe in their ability to replicate what went so well for them on offense last season. And then on defense, they lose Shaq Barrett. They don't really have pass rushers that I'm like scared of. I think they're going to be starting Yaya Diaby and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka this year on the edge, which is not like, that might be like one of the worst edge duos in the league. And they don't really have a ton of personnel that scares me. Like Todd Bowles can really light you up if you're bad against the blitz, but that's kind of it for me. The Broncos, I don't believe, are a good team. I do have the Chargers losing the game in Denver because Denver is cursed always, but I do think the Chargers are a much better team than Denver. I definitely believe in Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert more than I believe in Sean Payton and Bo Nix. This is easily the worst Patriots team in recent memory that they will face. The defense is still kind of good personnel, but if they were ever going to win in New England and not a game that's 6-0, it's probably this one. And then the Raiders, like they've won once in Vegas. It was obviously 2020 when there were no fans, but I just think that the Chargers are going to be hot at this point in time when it comes to Week 18. So I guess it's kind of a spoiler alert there, but I feel really great about the way this season or this schedule is shaping up in terms of the end of the season. And so I really believe that weeks 15 to 18 is extremely favorable for the Chargers.
Yeah, before the season. So like in 2022, excuse me, that end of the season stretch was cake, but we didn't really know that going into the season. We only found that out once Baker Mayfield was a Ram and Nick Foles was a Colt, and that was kind of the end of season stretch. This final 4 games, as it currently stands before we even get to the season, looks like the most favorable 4-game stretch to close out the season I can remember in a little bit, maybe since Herbert's rookie year, because I think they went either 3-1 or 4-0 to close out the season, although the Chiefs sat their starters for that final game. So I almost went with this one. This is the one I almost went with. I just have a big hang up with at Patriots, which they finally won, of course, of all years to win. They finally win in New England last year, but that's still a tricky one for me, especially being late in the year. And then at Raiders has just become like the bane of my existence. I hate watching those games. I've hated watching those games. I've been to one of those games and it sucked. I mean, it was fun, but it sucked because the ending
was
sucked.
an epic game, but it was so stressful.
Yes, 50, 60 minutes and then 10 more minutes of that game were awesome. But the last few, that field goal, I was there, it sucked. But like you said, the Chargers haven't won there since 2020 when Marcus Mariota was the quarterback because they needed Marcus Mariota to play quarterback and throw 28 times. And they still almost lost that game. So not fun. My 4-game stretch is 7, 8, 9, 10 at Cardinals, then home against the Saints, at Browns, and then home against the Titans. Really for me, and I do agree with you about the Buccaneers. If Canales was still there, I think I'd feel very differently about that game. But I don't really believe in Bulls. I don't believe the offense will be what it was last year. So that swayed a pick later on for my game predictions. But I don't know what to make of the Saints quarterback situation, how that's going to go, or the Browns quarterback situation, whoever is even playing quarterback. I don't know about the Titans this year. There's turnover, no more Vrabel. I don't know how they're going to be. So really, like, the Cardinals are a dangerous team. They're definitely a dangerous team. The Chargers don't have a corner who can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. As much as people say, like, Notre Dame, Ohio State, that whole thing, I get that. But I feel like Kyler Murray might be able to get the ball to him a bit better in this one. So, yeah, other than the Cardinals, Saints, Browns, Titans, I just don't know about the quarterback stretch there. And anytime, you can just say, hey, my quarterback is better than yours, and all things are almost equal. Otherwise, I think I'm going to take the favorable stretch there. So, I like Cardinals, Saints, Browns, Titans, but my next pick would have been yours, Bucks, Broncos, Patriots, Raiders.
I think this really came down to how I felt about the road game at the Browns and really like how I envisioned that game going. I mean, it's not going to be theoretically, it's not going to be very cold, but I just think the Browns defense is like one of the top units in the league. Obviously, Myles Garrett, one of the best players in the league, so even though they don't have a great quarterback situation, they do have a great scheme. They have a great running game, even without Nick Chubb, although he might be healthy at that point. I guess we'll see there. But that game for me is one of one of the most games I'm like least confident in for the Chargers.
Yeah, of this 8 games that we have here, that's definitely the most difficult game. So that was very difficult for me. We'll just see about their quarterback situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think your logic about quarterbacks, though, I think that checks out, and it's one of the reasons why I chose my decisions because of the quarterbacks as well.
Yeah.
All right, next one here. We decided to rank the 5 most likely wins on the Chargers schedule. Complete shocker. The Panthers is both of our number ones. That team is just so bad. So why don't you go over your next 4 after the Panthers game?
Yeah, so I have the Titans, Patriots, Saints, and Falcons. Again, I know, Fitness points out Derek Carr is the quarterback of the Saints. I just like Titans, Patriots, Saints, and Panthers. Sorry, Bryce Young. That quarterback situation, I'm not like, wow, they're going to drop 30 points on the Chargers, better score. Even if the Titans or the Patriots or Saints kind of make it ugly, that's the Chargers thing now. Like, they might be the team that likes to win ugly, and it's pretty when they win ugly sort of team. So I think that whereas before, like, I don't know that Brandon Staley could have consistently won against Vrabel. Now, I know the Titans have a different coach. Like, I feel like the Chargers can get down and dirty with Harbaugh as their coach. And then Falcons, I just don't like. They obviously just picked 6th overall. Like, they're not a great team by any means, or 7th, 8th, 7th, 25th. Said hike. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But whatever. They picked Michael Penix in the top 10,
Yeah.
and then they traded up for Ruka Rororo. Like, what I thought the Falcons could do with Kirk Cousins and then take that draft and just go defensive heavy and potentially really change their entire roster, it ended up being kind of a sad haul. Now, maybe it works out later. I don't know. But right now, your first round pick, top 10 pick, was a quarterback who's not going to play. And Rook, I like him. You traded up for him. And I just don't know that the rest of the team and the defense is going to be there. So Falcons are dangerous, but I like these 5 games for the Chargers to win.
Yeah, I'm realizing now that I probably should have put the Patriots on here, but especially after I just talked about them that way. But I guess when I filled this one out, I was like, oh, it's in New England. But
right.
I do have the Chargers winning the game, but it is what it is. So I think we're on the same page about the Saints and the Titans and the Panthers. I did put the Broncos on here again. I kind of talked about it previously. Same with the Buccaneers, but I think the Saints, like, they're just such a weird team. Like, they continue to push all of their chips in. I don't know if you saw this, but they are putting Talise Fuanga at left tackle to start his career, not right tackle where he played his entire college career. So I'm like, what are we doing? If you wanted a left tackle, why did you draft one of the left tackles? I don't understand. And like, they're gonna make what's his name from South Dakota State, or not South Dakota State, Northern Iowa, Trevor Penning. They're gonna make him play right tackle, even though he's played left tackle the bulk of his career. I don't understand.
Oh, man.
So, the Saints have some good players that I think could give certain parts of the Chargers problems. Like, I do expect Chris Olave to kind of have a good game. Marshall Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, and they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry. Like, they have a great cornerback room. Like, that might be one of the best in the league. So there are some reasons to give me pause, but at the end of the day, like, I think the Saints offensive line is deteriorated in a really significant way. And same thing with the defensive line. Like, I think this is a game where the Chargers can flex a little bit in terms of their trench talent. And like, this Chargers edge rusher room is going to eat Fuanga and Penning alive. And I like Fuanga, but they're making him switch sides. So I just think that's a trench game where the Chargers have a very clear advantage for me.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That sucks. So, I mean, he's very talented and he has the right demeanor, but that stinks. And that's week 8. So it's not like he's had a whole year to adjust. I mean, you get 7 games, and then there's the Chargers and Mac and Thule and Dupree and Bosa. Have fun. And Derwin James when he feels like it. So yeah, that's definitely not fun there. Broncos, they were probably like the 6th team I would have put, 6th or 7th. So they were like an honorable mention here.
Sure.
But I don't know, Broncos division game. Definitely wouldn't have put at Broncos on here. There's a very different tier for that one.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Division games, it's hard to call them like a most likely win, but I don't believe in the Broncos this year with Bo Nix. Like, we laughed at that pick for a reason. Okay, 5 most likely losses here. I guess I'll start us off here. No surprise here, but I am starting with week 14 at the Kansas City Chiefs. Probably a cold game against a team that at that point in the season is going to be rounding into Super Bowl form. We talked about the Ravens briefly, and then I mentioned the week 9 at Browns. That is definitely a game where I just don't feel great about it because of their defense, because of who the Browns also have in the running game at wide receiver. So it's just, I think it gives the Chargers a lot of bad matchups there outside of quarterback, where obviously the Chargers have a significant advantage. Week 6 at the Broncos. Again, I understand, like, some people think that thing is overrated. They have not won in Denver since 2018. And before that, they did not win in Denver since 2013. So they have won twice at Denver in the last 10 years. And let me say that again. The Chargers have won 2 games in Denver in the last 10 years. I am not picking them to win in Denver until it starts happening more consistently. It's just one of those things. And then I have a really hard time picturing them beating the Chiefs at all this year. I just think the Chiefs are really in a great spot where every position where the Chargers are weak, the Chiefs have a great room. You know, the Chiefs cornerback room, even without
Snead,
L'Jarius Sneed, is fantastic. The Chiefs defensive tackle room, like it's going to give the Chargers and has given the Chargers a lot of problems. The Chiefs interior offensive line against the Chargers interior defensive line.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of mismatches that don't make me feel great. And then this is a team coming off back-to-back Super Bowls. Like they are going to, I think, win another like 13, 14 games this year. So I just have a really difficult time seeing them beating the Chiefs this year. I think they go 0-2 against the Chiefs, unfortunately.
Yeah, I felt bad putting the Chiefs on here twice, but like that's the best team they'll face on their schedule the entire season, and they got to do it twice. And unfortunately, there's such a well-oiled machine. You know, I get it. But even like, okay, why would the Chargers win at Arrowhead before? I don't know. Mike Williams. He's not on the team anymore. Like when it comes, like I need to see the Chargers play defense and run the football before I believe that Mahomes and Andy Reid aren't just going to put 40 on them. Because I just don't know who's stopping the wide receivers right now. And that's not to say I don't like Asante Samuel Jr. or Derwin. It's not that I don't like Cam Hart as a selection. Like we did. But there's a difference between like liking the selections and liking the opportunities and the prospects of these players versus like, hey, go play defense against a great quarterback and a great offensive mind. So the Rashid Rice situation is definitely tricky. We'll see. They play the Chiefs in week 4. So if there's a 4-game suspension, if that's all it is, then they'll miss that first game. So things might change. But that's true. Brett does say that Josh Palmer crushes the Chiefs. That is true. He has. He did last year in Arrowhead. So that's a good call there. We'll see what kind of offense they're running out. You and I differ at Broncos. I don't know, but I immediately picked them I picked that destination as a spot that they lost. So I guess I could have put that on here too. But I went with at Steelers here and then went with the Ravens. Or no, excuse me. Well, we both with the Ravens, but with the Bengals here. The at Steelers one is a big coin toss for me because I totally get why the Chargers would win and should win. With that said, I've seen them lose this game so many times to far inferior teams, or at least inferior quarterbacks. Now we'll see what Wilson and Fields provide for the Steelers, but I just think the Arthur Smith signing at head coach went underrated because of how things went with Atlanta. But there's a difference. Like him as a coach in Atlanta did not work as an offensive coordinator under Tomlin. And listen, the Steelers had a freaking great draft. You go through their draft and they got value every single spot along the way with their first 5 selections. Like it's nasty how good they did. So unfortunately, that one is a tough one for me. It is not an easy place to play. And I just think the Steelers, I don't even know how good they're going to be, but they're tough as hell. And now that the Vrabel and the Titans are gone, like they're the other team that's just like, yeah, I don't know. We're just gonna win. And like they won 10 games last year, guys.
Yeah, and TJ Watt missed like 8 games.
Yeah.
So it's I think the marriage between Arthur Smith and whoever they start at quarterback, it sounds like Russell Wilson is going to be their guy. It's a little weird to me. Like Arthur Smith's bulk of his career, the passing game is like over the middle stuff. And Russell Wilson refuses to throw over the middle of the field. So I think you and I are going to disagree a bit here because of that. Like, I think it is going to take them a bit to get like the Russell Wilson, Arthur Smith thing like ironed out. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers lost that game, but I think because of that and because it's early for the Chargers, I actually do think that does play to their advantage a bit against the Steelers. If they're playing at Steelers in December, I would probably feel different about it. But I think that could easily be like a 17-14 game. And in those kind of instances, I'm kind of just leaning towards taking the better quarterback. And so obviously the Chargers have that. So that's probably the game that me and you disagree most on, I would say, is week 3 at Steelers.
Interesting. Okay. Excited to get into that later on.
All right. Next one here. We did 5 games that could surprise. This could be a positive surprise, whether for you personally or for the national narratives that could come out. It could also be a negative surprise. We see this every single year. Teams lose games to other teams that like they shouldn't lose to. At the end of the day, it's the NFL. Every team can be beat on any given Sunday. So Tyler, why don't you go first here with your 5 games that could be a surprise on the Chargers schedule?
Yeah, so part of this was definitely a Chargers fan perception of how things might go. I could have honestly included the Broncos one here like you did. Oh, no, you had the opposite. Because I feel like Chargers fans go, oh, Denver, they're not good. They'll beat them. But again, it's the at Denver thing. But for me, my 5 those are the surprises, and they can go either way. The Chargers lose to the Cardinals. I think a lot of Chargers fans are going, yep, they'll win. Yeah, I don't know. They could be dangerous. Number 2, Chargers beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead in week 14. It might not be a surprise by the time we get to that point, but like the Chargers rallying, getting through a tough stretch, and then beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead before a very easy schedule to finish out the season would be massive. So that would be a surprise because it's not easy to win there. Number 3, the Chargers lose at home to the Saints. Again, a surprise. Number 4, the Chargers lose on the road to the Steelers, which I think is going to surprise a lot of people if it happens. Wouldn't surprise me. And then number 5, the Chargers lose on the road in week 18 against the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, I get it on paper. I think the Chargers are better. I think they have a coaching advantage. They definitely have the quarterback advantage. But I've seen it happen. Week 18, they need to win. They didn't. And I've seen them lose there now 3 times in a row. And I just think it's becoming a difficult place to play for the Chargers. I think Harbaugh has them ready. But that Raiders team, a division game, especially if the Chargers win early on, the Raiders just have this spoiler mentality that they've always had, but certainly in recent years, like, oh, well, Chargers are almost getting the postseason. Not this year, or I'm not going to let you get that same seed that you wanted. So they're just, even if the Raiders are out of the postseason, they're just going to want to play to wreck the Chargers season. And there's just something about that game that becomes very dangerous like it usually doesn't.
Yeah, and I think, I think there's always at this time of year the Chargers are going to sweep the Raiders, but like when was the last time they actually swept the Raiders? Like, I guess I could look this up, but I feel like it's been a long time since they actually swept the Raiders.
2020? I don't remember the last time they did this.
Well, because 2020 they lost the game at home. It was like the Donald Parham
that game,
and they threw like 3 jump balls. I guess in 2018 they probably swept the Raiders, but division games are hard, man. Like even if the Chargers are great and the Raiders are bad, these games are generally hard unless LT is around. That was the only time the Raiders games were easy. But it's a difficult matchup. The Raiders have some really good players, and we'll talk about more of that in a second here. So I do think that people are kind of underestimating them, especially coming off the schedule release where like the Chargers called them clowns and like did that whole thing. So that was funny. The Saints one I think is interesting because like I think you and I both view the game the same, but it is a very veteran laden team. And I know like people will poo-poo on Derek Carr, but he's a good quarterback. You have Cameron Jordan. You have some players that I think could give the Chargers some problems. So I think that would be perhaps more of like a national surprise too, but
yeah.
Okay, so for me, I have my 5 as the Chargers beating the Bengals handedly at home. I wanted to make sure and include that one. The Bengals, like I mentioned, they're kind of being viewed as like a Super Bowl contender, and I think they are the better team right now. But there is a world where the Chargers run game just is like just crushing it at that point in the season. The Bengals don't really have a great defense. They don't really have like a great offensive tackle duo. I mean, you're talking about Orlando Brown and Trent Brown. So I do expect the Chargers to struggle with certain aspects of that game. But there is kind of a recipe there where the run game just crushes them. And then Herbert play action dots and they kind of cruise control. We've seen that game, obviously, in 2021. So that was one. Chargers losing the home opener, I think, is an underrated potential here for what people are talking about. There's a lot of the Raiders that gives me pause about their matchups with the Chargers. And I know we talked about this a bit yesterday. Joe Alt could struggle pretty mightily against Max Crosby. Max Crosby is one of the 3 best edge rushers in the league. There's also the Christian Wilkins aspect of things. We've seen what Christian Wilkins can do to the Chargers interior offensive line several times in the past. And like are we starting Trey Pipkins? Are we starting Jamari Sawyer? Like, there's a recipe here where the Chargers offensive line kind of struggles in that first game. Sweeping the Broncos, this would be a personal surprise to me. Like, I think this is, again, we talked about the at Denver thing, but there is a recipe here where the Chargers do win both of those games. I don't believe the Broncos are good. It's mostly just like at Denver. And then winning at week 18, it's the opposite of you. I think that momentum is a very real thing for the Chargers, and I think there's a chance that they are just a hot team at that point in the season, and they win 4 games at the end of the season and get into the playoffs. I think that would surprise a lot of people nationally. And then 5, I would argue the biggest trap game for me is the Tennessee Titans because of who the Chargers play after that. So right after the Titans, you get the Bengals and the Ravens. Arguably, like they're two, not even arguably, I would say they're 2 biggest non-division games of the season. You're talking about Joe Burrow, you're talking about the Harbaugh Bowl, potentially 2 AFC contenders, depending on who you ask. And that's just kind of a recipe for a trap game. So I think the Titans is an underrated, potential surprise game there. And I wanted to make sure to include that to wrap up my 5.
Yeah, we don't know a whole lot about the Titans right now. They could definitely surprise, so we'll see how they do. Again, these are the games that could surprise. So it's not like you're saying, oh, the Chargers will lose to the Titans and, the Chargers are just going to beat the snot out of the Bengals. It's more of a surprise. But, yeah, no, I hate and like these at the same time because of the surprise nature of it.
Yeah, everybody likes to make the season so cut and dry, but
nope.
I mean, stuff happens, anything can happen on a given Sunday. So that's why we wanted to include this list to be able to talk about some potentially surprising games here.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are our record predictions. I am going with 9-8. Tyler's going with 10-7. Tyler, why don't you run down your list and explain what the highlighted games are for each of us?
Yeah, you pessimistic butthole. 9-8. Good gracious, are you even a fan of this team? All right, so I'm going 10-7, 3-3 in the division, and I just want to say, I don't think it's as good of a 10-7 team as 10-7 might indicate. It's mostly about the schedule. I don't know that this is as good of a 10-7 team as it indicates, but 10-7 probably gets you into the postseason. Great. So I have them winning at home against the Raiders and at Carolina Panthers. So they start 2-0. Then I had them losing 3 straight. One against Pittsburgh on the road, then against Kansas City, and then at Denver. At Denver sucks. Denver's not a better team, but at Denver sucks. I like at Pittsburgh sucks. So I have them, 3-2 to start the season. And then they will beat the Cardinals and the Saints, lose to the Browns on the road, beat the Titans, and then lose to the Bengals and the Ravens in week 11 and 12, unfortunately. Then beat the and the Atlanta Falcons, lose to at Kansas City, unfortunately, but then rattle 4 wins in a row against the Bucks, Broncos, Patriots, and Raiders, which is where we both agree, actually. What I have highlighted in gold for those on YouTube, these are like the coin toss kind of games where I had to pick something, but I don't feel great about it. Like, I genuinely believe that while the Browns, they could lose to the Browns, I could see where they'd win. Same with the Steelers, Bengals, and Bucks. These are the games that change the direction of the season and how it's looked at. If you obviously win the 3 games that I picked them to lose in this stretch, it's a much better season. But you can really flip how things go. And I think it could A, go either way, and B, could change so much of the season. So like Tampa Bay, I think they're going to win. I believe they're going to win. But if Tampa Bay is still hot, or the Chargers don't take them seriously, or they're tired after Kansas City or whatever, and they lose that could knock them out of the postseason. So these games are ones that, of course, I'd love to win all the games. But those games in particular, I think, are tricky.
Yeah. So I think our coin toss games for the most part are different. Like I said, the Browns I view as a very, very difficult matchup. You have it as a toss-up game. We both view the Bengals as a toss-up, predicting a loss, but I think that's a fair assessment of where that game is at. I think how you feel about the Bucks is how I feel about the Falcons. And then the Raiders week 1, that's a toss-up game for me right now. Again, a lot of this kind of depends on health, depends on on where the Chargers are at with their guard situation. Like if they go out and sign Dalton Reisner and he plays right guard, I probably will switch this to a win because I don't know where that room is going to be at. But I think there is a world where the Chargers start the season out relatively slow. So I have them basically going 2-2 before the bye and then losing to the Broncos after the bye. So, and you have the same. So they'd be 2-3, and then I kind of, get a little bit more comfortable here. But I think for me, I guess I'll just run through it here. So I have the Chargers losing to the Raiders to open, beating the Panthers, beating the Steelers. So that's a game that we differ on as well. Losing to the Chiefs, losing to the Broncos, beating the Cardinals, beating the Saints, losing to the Browns, beating the Titans, losing to the Bengals, losing to the Ravens, beating the Falcons, losing to the Chiefs, and then winning the last 4 games, which is what you have as well. So I am 9-8, 2-4 in the division. You have 10-7, 3-3 the division. Essentially, our biggest disagreements are week 1 and week 3, where I have the Chargers losing against the Raiders, winning against the Steelers, and you have the opposite there.
Okay, so I hate the idea that Dalton Reisner is going to switch your pick for the week 1 loss to a week 1 win potentially. I get why it's dangerous. I just don't see the Chargers dropping that game in the opener. There are reasons that they could, but I don't see them actually doing it. But like you said, it's a toss-up game for you right now. I'm honestly, when I opened this up, I was stunned that you had the Chargers losing that first game.
Yeah, I think also there's just like the fan aspect of it. Like, unfortunately, I do think that like plays a bit. Unfortunately, like I hope everybody shows up. I will not be attending that game. I refuse to attend Raiders games, but that's just me. Any more Raiders games, I should say. So I expect that Jim Harbaugh is going to have the Chargers ready for this game. I just think that there are players that can give the Chargers fits at positions that I think the Chargers could really like use some time with. Like Max Crosby is Joe Alt's worst possible opening game. And then you have Christian Wilkins and things like that. You have Devonta Adams, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Brock Bowers, you have Michael Mayer. So it's did I mess up? Are people saying
yes.
I messed up?
I just started. I counted yours. Yes, you are actually have them at 10-7.
I do? Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Never mind. You're a good fan again.
I'm a good fan again. All right. I thought I had 9-8. Okay. I guess I don't know how to count.
What do I have them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, 1, 2.
Do you have 11 and 6 then?
5, 6. No, I have 10.
Okay. Are we sure?
I mathed. Now I got to count the L's here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. Got it.
Wait, now I'm counting. 1, 2 wins.
I counted
1,
yours
2, 3,
while you were talking. I counted
5,
yours.
6, 7. I swear that was 9. Okay.
It's okay.
My bad. Brain is fried a bit here.
Okay, so I guess then, like, okay, let's just say as is. Like, do you have them going? Would you predict 9-8, not even doing game by game, or 10-7?
In my head, this is a 9-8 team. I guess I have to go back here and switch one of these games to a loss, but I don't know which one I would choose.
You can pick. I don't know. Chat. Which random game should the Chargers lose on Steven's schedule?
I think what happened here is that I initially had the Chargers losing week 18, and then that's where I put the 9-8, and then I was like, wait, they're not losing twice to the Raiders, and then that's when I switched and I forgot to update the 10-7.
All good. So your positivity shines through no matter what. Chat, while we figure this out, what is your record prediction?
Yeah.
Just get it off the screen.
Yeah. I think, okay, so here's my rationale and why I think like there are people who are predicting 12-5, 11 wins. I can't get there. To me, this is like if the Chargers played a normal schedule that was not against the NFC South, I would probably have them like on paper. This is a 7-win roster. And then I think Harbaugh is worth 2 wins. And then I think the schedule is worth the extra win, basically is how I'm like looking at this now that I'm doing 10-7. So that's kind of my thought process. Like, I think people are struggling with like where this roster is really at. And everybody keeps on saying online, like, oh, the Chargers have great depth now. Do they really? They have great depth at like 2 positions. Like they have
Guard.
really great offensive tackle depth for the first time in my life. They have great
Sweet.
edge rusher depth.
They do.
Obviously, the quarterback is great, but we are a Will Dissly injury away from having a worse tight end room than last year. Like Hayden Hurst as tight end 1 terrifies me. What happens if Poona Ford gets injured? What happens if Derwin James gets injured, or even Alohi Gilman? What happens if Asante Samuel Jr. gets injured? What happens if Josh Palmer gets injured? What happens if Zion Johnson gets injured? What happens if Bradley Bozeman gets injured and we're starting Brendan Hymus at center? Like, I think people are kind of overestimating where the roster is at. Mm-hmm. So if they played a better schedule, then I think you're talking about an 8-win team. Yes, obviously, knock on wood. I hope all those players stay very, very healthy. But that's part of, like, people get injured in the NFL. And I think people who are overly optimistic are really neglecting where the roster is at, both from a star talent standpoint and a depth standpoint.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they make some sort of moves, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the summer to to give me more optimism about some of the depth. Like you said, Bradley Bozeman, who we're just hoping he has a better season than last year. Like, we're assuming he's going to be better, and I think he will be. But if he continues trending downward from where he was last year, well, that's a rough center spot for the Chargers to be in, whereas previously, obviously, Cord Lindsley, like the standard. So, yeah, we'll see how they do. You know, there's luck into this. I totally get that Harbaugh gives the Chargers an advantage, and I think for most of my selections, that bears out. Like, Harbaugh and Herbert give the Chargers advantage in most of these games. So I get it. I see it in the chat. Like, we're not neglecting the fact that Harbaugh gives them an advantage, but this team, like, they're going to win some. Honestly, 10 wins or 9 wins or whatever Steve wants to predict is like them kind of overachieving because of that coach, you know, because this, like you said, in a different year, and I sort of discussed at the top of the show, it's just the schedule, you know, it's not whatever the record ends up being. I don't think it's as strong of a record as if they had the exact same record maybe last year with a much, much tougher schedule. So we'll see. Luckily the schedule is just, it's not that it's easy, but it's way easier than I can remember in quite some time. And that's before other teams start losing players. Now, the Chargers could too, but things change in the NFL very quickly. So, yeah, 10 feels good to me, but I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Where was it one? Yeah, as Jim points out, like, what just happened? Oh, you're going back. You know, Jim's a top 3 coach, right? I don't know that Jim. Well, there you go. We got fireworks from Steven. I don't know for sure that Jim Harbaugh's a top 3 coach. I'm not saying that he's like outside the top 10, but like I gotta double check, and we got to see this actually happen for the Chargers. Like, it is Jim Harbaugh versus Chargers curse of never winning and collapsing and charging. Like, there's a lot he has to overcome. I think that Harbaugh gets the Chargers there next year. I don't think that this is the year to expect a ton. And honestly, 10 wins for me is them overachieving because of Harbaugh and the direction of this team.
Yeah.
More so than like, I think they're be that good.
Yeah. Top 3 coach in the league. That's a tough one for me to get behind. I'm very excited about Jim Harbaugh. I'm very excited about where this regime is going. And I think for the most part, outside of like the Keenan Allen move, which, you know, I don't want to rehash everything, but every other move the Chargers have made from Joe Hortiz, from the front office, it's been an A offseason. You know, they've made consistently smart, good decisions all offseason long. I think Jim Harbaugh is worth 2 wins to this roster. Like, and that's a lot. There's like not many coaches who are actually worth like 2 or 3 wins. So top 3 is a stretch for me right now, given that we haven't seen him in the NFL in a decade. And Andy Reid is coming off 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. And Kyle Shanahan basically has, you know, they can book an NFC championship appearance right now.
Yeah.
So there's 2. And then you're talking
his
about
brother John.
Yeah. So there's there's a lot of great coaches in this league. So we can throw that out, but to me, it's more about like where the roster is actually at. And they got rid of half of their blue chip talent from the last year's roster. And you're replacing it with young players who I really like and smart, cheap veteran additions, but they're question marks. Like the Chargers, you're talking about going from Corey Linsley to Bradley Bozeman. I think Bradley Bozeman is going to be fine. That is a significant downgrade. You're talking about going from Keenan Allen, Mike Williams to Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, DJ Chark, some combination of it. Like there's significant downgrades at several of the roster positions. So it's not about doubt in Harbaugh. It's about really, for me, where the roster is at. This is a roster that was not a total overhaul, but this is a retool or competitive rebuild, whatever verb you want to use there. But this roster was in terrible shape, and it's not in great shape. It's just like they have made smart moves to potentially be in better shapes. I just think we have to see it first. Yeah. So it's not about Hortiz. It's not about Harbaugh. I am 100% bought in. I just don't think it's this year. Next year, when they have 10 picks and $100 million in cap space, that's the year where you are, this is a contending team. Yeah. This roster is not a contending team. This roster is a 7 or 8 win team. And then you add the Harbaugh value of 2 or 3 wins after that.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. If you think they're a 13 win team this year, which is, hey, if you want to, awesome. I could definitely see how the Chargers could get there too. But if you believe they're a 13 win team this year, are they just undefeated next year when they go all in? Like that's unrealistic. So I like them at 10 now because next year, when we do this record prediction, and assuming all goes well, I can get them to like maybe 12 or 13 wins. And that feels like where they should be. So I'm not trying to overestimate here. We did it. The unfortunate thing is, and I totally get it. We do now that we've done this, we've discussed now different coaching changes. On this podcast, we've had Lynn, we've had Staley, now Harbaugh, or different offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. We always cycle through why they're going to be better. And, oh, like this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And therefore we get 3 more wins or 5 more wins or 4 more wins because of health, because of whatever. It's like, there's always something else. Like there's an anchor to this. There's something else. You think there's a lot of positives. I get it, but there's always an anchor. There's an obstacle. There's a speed bump. Herbert breaks his ribs. Herbert fractures his finger. Corey Linsley does not play after week 3. Like there's just something. And that's for every team too, but not every team can go 17-0, right? Not every team's going to go 20-0, win the Super Bowl. Yay. Next year, I hope the Chargers do, but this year, like just find your identity. And then next year, really then you could start winning.
Yeah. And to clarify the roster comment, like if you sit here and tell me that on May 16th, 2023, if you looked at that roster and thought that roster was worse than this current roster, I have questions for you. If you want to talk to me about what the roster was on January 16th versus now, yes, 100% the roster is in much better shape. But I think if you are comparing where we were at last May from a roster standpoint, again, we all had questions about the coaching staff, but from a roster standpoint, that's what I'm talking about right now. The coaching staff, I think, is going to elevate a lot of these players and answer a lot of the questions. We have to see it first. I'm not going to put a ceiling on Jim Harbaugh. Like, I think the chances of them winning 11 or 12 games is on the table. But when you're predicting this, like we are doing right now, this is where I ended up at 10-7 officially, even though I thought it was 9-8.
Okay, 10-7. We did it. 10-7. 10-7.
Last question here to kind of wrap this up from Edsky. I think this is a good kind of bow on it. Is this a playoff team for you, Tyler?
I think 10 wins naturally does enter them in that discussion. We'll see, because the AFC is like, hey, guess what? We're all good. And things happen, of course. But
it's a gauntlet, man.
It's a gauntlet to get in. And thank God, like Caleb Williams went to the Bears, So we'll see. If you believe 10-7 gets them to the playoffs, then yes, I believe they're a playoff team. Does 10-7 get them to the playoffs? That was really the question. So I think they are a playoff team, but the AFC is so complicated where you might just have to win 11 and you won't get in if you don't.
Yeah, so the Chargers, you're going to be talking about a wild card team because the Chiefs are going to win the division.
Totally.
The wild card race is crazy, man. Like we saw it last year where the 4 AFC North teams kind of just like conquered all. And like, I don't think the Steelers will be a playoff team again this year, but they've never had a losing season under Mike Tomlin. Like they're probably going to go 9-8. So it's just a very difficult team. I think the Bengals are being a little overvalued, but I expect them to make the playoffs. The Browns just made the playoffs despite starting like 7 different quarterbacks. So we'll see what happens there. The Bills might regress, but I'm not picking the Dolphins to win the AFC East. Like I'm not picking the Jets to win the AFC East. Like I still think maybe 2 of those teams make the playoffs, but
Tua.
Nice. Pun not intended. So it's just, man, the AFC is crazy. And if Anthony Richardson stays healthy this year, I think the Colts could be like scary good. The Jaguars are still pretty good. I mean, with Trevor Lawrence and all those guys, the Texans are kind of like the media darling of the offseason right now after getting Stephon Diggs and all of them.
Yeah.
How many bad teams are in the AFC? Like 1, the Patriots, and
depends how you feel about the other teams in the AFC West, honestly. The Titans.
Yeah.
Thank God they don't have Vrabel, I guess.
If the Chargers were in the NFC, dude, like they'd be like the 4th best team.
I'm booking my flight to at least one time playoff game for sure.
It's unreal how just striking the differences between the 2 conferences right now. So
yeah,
I think the Chargers are going to be in the mix, like firmly in the mix for the playoff hunt. Winning 4 games down the stretch would be huge for them. But I haven't necessarily decided like full on who is going to make the playoffs and not this year.
Yeah. And that would be awesome. That would be my realistic good goal for them. Make the postseason.
Yeah.
Push forward. See if you can win a game. Figure out your identity. Feel good about your team. Hopefully that means you stayed healthy too and the program is working. Overachieve a little bit. Maybe win a playoff game. But just getting in. That'd be awesome. If the Chargers at least made it interesting and made the postseason, I'd be stoked. That's a great first year. Because the next year, like you said, all those picks, $100 million to go, year 2 and everything. Like, okay, like then you go make that push, and then hopefully when they go all in this time, they really make it all the way.
Yeah, I think anything more than 8 wins, and I'm pretty happy with the season. If they are in the hunt to end the season, I'm happy. I know Jim Harbaugh is probably not going to be happy with like not winning a playoff game and stuff like that.
No.
But, it's just kind of where the roster is at. So
yeah,
I'm fully bought into the vision. I think it's going to be a super fun season, but I do think there are going to be some lumps taken early on in the year.
Yeah.
All righty. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. I'm sure some of you are going to disagree with a lot of our takes here. I know based off of Twitter, it's been fun. Alex has been getting kind of cooked today on social media, but
what else is new?
Yeah. All right. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out?
No.
All right. Cool. We'll be back to our usual schedule next week, starting back on Monday and Tuesday. I am not going to be here on Thursday, but Tyler might be with a guest. I don't know. We'll figure it out. My parents are coming to town, so I'm taking next weekend off for Memorial Day, so it should be a lot of fun. That's going to do it for us today. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. That does really help continue to grow the show. We appreciate all of you. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. As always, bolts up.